Okay, welcome everybody. My name is Carla Barber, and we have a panel today that includes Vielka Rivera-Wambold, Julie Swift, Sue Ann DeVito, and Rosie Vogan. All five of us participated in the Journey for Justice. And what we're going to do now is we recorded our presentation so that we would have control over the time. And we're going to play that recording. And then at the conclusion of the recording, all of us will come back on the screen and answer any questions you may have.
Welcome to Witness at the Border, Journey for Justice, Peregrinaje por la Justicia. For 17 days in December, a group of 50 people participated in the Journey for Justice. We traveled by car caravan from the Gulf of Mexico to the Pacific Ocean. The journey was 2,200 miles. This action was organized by Witness at the Border, a group dedicated to witnessing the consequences of policies inhibiting the rights of people to migrate. The group was started in 2018 by Joshua Rubin to shine a light on the Tornillo detention camp in the desert at the outskirts of El Paso. As Josh says, to witness is to engage in the subversive act of seeing. On the journey, we traveled from Boca Chica Beach, east of Brownsville, Texas, to the Pacific Ocean in San Ysidro, California. Our journey concluded on International Migrants Days. We made 12 stops during the first week, starting in Brownsville and culminating in El Paso, including a slight detour to Uvalde. The second week started in El Paso and made 10 stops along our way to San Ysidro. We embarked on this journey to see with our own eyes the current conditions at the border. We had the opportunity to honor the lives of asylum seekers who have lost their lives on their journey. We met with many groups working along the border and had the opportunity to witness the work they are doing. We witnessed immigrants trying to cross the border, and we hope the information that we bring back will help to communicate and change policy.
The Universal Declaration of Human Rights was adopted in 1948. Article 14 of the UDHR grants the right to seek and enjoy asylum from persecution. This right, in addition to the right to leave one's own country, Article 13, and the right to nationality, Article 15, can be traced directly to the events of the Holocaust. Many countries whose drafters worked on the UDHR were acutely aware that they had turned away Jewish refugees, likely condemning them to death. Title 8 of the U.S. Code covers the laws of immigration and nationality. However, those laws have been largely tossed aside since March 20th, 2020, and replaced with Title 42. Title 42 was created to address public health. At the onset of COVID-19, the Trump administration put it in place to effectively ban anyone from seeking asylum, keeping migrants stuck in Mexico. This is a COVID-era policy put in place by the same legislators that oppose COVID policies and restrictions. The policy is very confusing, and how it applies depends on who you are and where you are. I wasn't sure what to expect on this trip to the border. Starting in Matamoros, what I saw shocked me. Due to the policies currently in place, many migrants are stuck waiting in Mexico for an opportunity to cross the border. And many cross irregularly between ports, crossing rivers or deserts, and then wait to be picked up by Border Patrol. Pictured here are people who have crossed the border in Yuma. They are waiting to be picked up by CBP. These are the faces of some of the people that we saw. In Matamoros, people started to come out, and we were surrounded by about 2,000 people in this one very small area. There were a lot of children. They thought we were reporters, so they surrounded us because they really wanted so desperately to tell their stories. One woman wanted us to know that she was actually from Mexico, and they were making people wait in Mexico, but she wasn't there because Mexico isn't safe. She was getting called several times a week to pick her children up from school because the cartel was coming in and shooting up the school. She had to stop working her job at night because it was too dangerous to walk through the streets, and she was afraid for her life. So they sold their home and they're trying to come to the United States. Another woman shared that when she entered Mexico, they lined the women up and did cavity searches. They did not change gloves from one woman to the next. When she asked them about human rights, they were told by the government official in Mexico that there are no human rights in Mexico. I tell you these stories because this is where we are asking people to stay. When I say we, I mean the current policies are asking people to stay in a spot that our own State Department website has travel advisories against because of the high rates of crime, rape, kidnapping, and death. Even government employees are restricted from traveling to these areas. I'd like you to meet Angelise and her family from Venezuela. I'm going to tell her story because I think it encapsulates a lot of the bizarreness of the process. Angelise is a physical therapist and her husband is an engineer. He worked for the state in Venezuela. In February of 2021, their adult son was kidnapped. Though they paid a huge ransom, he was not returned. Previously, three of her own brothers were murdered. Unable to continue to be extorted, they fled to Colombia in March of 2022. They cannot return to Venezuela at this point because they are considered traitors. While in Colombia, they were being harassed by the police. They showed me pictures of their home from the video cameras with the police in the house threatening them, and they had to leave their house. They decided to take their daughter-in-law and two grandchildren to come to the United States to be with their daughter and son-in-law in Louisville. They left Colombia in September on their journey to join their daughter in the United States. They arrived in Matamoros, Mexico, the end of November. Rules for Venezuelan asylum seekers have changed twice since the start of their journey. They are living on the river embankment while they wait in line. The policies and rules utilized at the border are designed to be cruel and inhumane. Shoelaces. Let's talk about shoelaces. I can't for the life of me figure out why the first thing that the Customs and Border Patrol does when they meet an asylum seeker is to take their shoelaces. It brands them as if it was a scarlet letter because what happens is if they are on this side of the border and they are waiting at night alone for a bus that may not come for a couple of days, the gangs see them and know that they are targets. If they get released back to Mexico, they are marked for the cartel who know they were not able to get into the United States. The cartel can now traffic them and do whatever because they know they could not get into our country. So I don't really know what the purpose of the shoelaces are, but one of the big things is we keep thinking about big things that and what we can't do on policy changes. I just want them to stop taking shoelaces. We had actually walked down to the riverbank, and it was very disturbing because I was like, what was that smell? And then I realized that these wonderful people who have so much dignity and pride are being forced to go to the bathroom at the edge of the river because there are no facilities. And when we were walking back up, we met this young gentleman who had a cut his ankle while traveling through the Darien Gap, which is a jungle a lot of people have to journey through. His ankle was infected. It had been infected for weeks, and he had to figure out, with the little money that he had left, if he should get antibiotics to make himself better or use the money for food for his child. This is where someone tried to get across and put stuff down to protect themselves from the razor wire. Why are we putting barbed wire on fences? When picked up by Border Patrol, migrants are forced to leave their belongings behind. only permitted to keep what fits in a small plastic bag, documents, jewelry, etc. Everything else has to be left behind. Immigrants are supported by organizations along the way to provide food, shelter, and clothing. They rely on finding water left for them in the desert by the many Good Samaritans that go out to find migrants in distress and leave water. There is a well-organized team in Brownsville called Team Brownsville. Previously, the Mexican government let NGOs and nonprofits go in to do work they are no longer allowing. This is Rosa. She goes out on her way to work and her way home from work to feed people in El Paso. This is Karina's shelter. She is in Juarez. The shelter is serving pregnant women. Eagle Pass is another border town. Mission Hope here is doing a remarkable job, and when people are released from the detention centers, they come here. They are given a meal, they're given access to Wi-Fi, they're shown a map of our country because some people don't know that New York is way up here and Texas is way down here. The migrants have hope, faith, and resilience that is so remarkable. This gentleman spoke to me because if you look at his shirt, it's an Eagle shirt, and I'm from outside of Philadelphia. But also, look at what he is doing. He was putting his skills to use, and the gentleman whose hair he was doing was trying to maintain his dignity in the most undignified conditions. Whether it is a makeshift barbershop, a hug on a bench, or a soccer game, they find ways to sneak in even a touch of normalcy in settings that are anything but normal. The people I met have hope and faith, and they care for each other. They are incredibly resilient. They have a hope and a faith in our country and our government that I sometimes am challenged to have. The way the people I met looked out for each other was just incredible. They shared their meager belongings with one another. There is a myth that people are coming across the border in droves. In fact, they are lining up on the Mexican side, waiting to legally enter and ask their legal right to asylum. So again, the people I met are just really like us. So the next time people tell you, why don't people get in line? They actually are in line. They are trying to do it the right way. It is our government who keeps changing the rules. Immigrants are human beings that deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. I asked the people that we met what they wish we all understood. These are some of the responses.
We traveled along the border wall wherever it was possible. The border wall takes on many shapes and forms. There's a total of approximately 700 miles of border wall and barrier. The total length of the border is 1,954 miles. On the journey, we saw soldiers waving as we passed by, Border Patrol agents leaning out of their vehicles looking for footprints while dragging tires behind their trucks along the dirt paths that run just off the highway, tracking and hunting as if people are animals. We saw blimps overhead watching for anyone who might be crossing in the desert. We saw massive floodlights and learned about the sensors that pick up any movement along the border, many located in desolate areas where the closest town to the border is 60 miles away. The wall in Brownsville, on the river embankment on the U.S. side of the border, in Hidalgo, running right through a park, Laredo, one of the places in Texas where there is no wall, at least for now, and Governor Abbott's container wall in Eagle Pass. The Rio Grande runs along the entire border of Texas, so the river has to be crossed to reach the wall. In some areas, it is a fence that abruptly ends. In Big Bend, there is no man-made wall, but a natural barrier. In Arizona, through backyards, here people can come to the wall to talk to their friends and family. The wall in the middle of Oregon Pipe National Monument. And Governor Ducey's container wall that you could literally walk around. It is now gone, taken down by the new governor. This stunt costing Arizona taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars. Here you can see a portion of the wall in San Diego with a higher, more reinforced 18-foot wall behind it, and several of the pictures of the wall at Friendship Park in San Isidro. Friendship Park, historically a place where loved ones separated by the wall could meet on Sundays, has been closed for 3 years. There is a proposal to rebuild the wall to a height of 30 feet. The problem is that people try to climb walls, and a 30-foot fall can be deadly. So under Trump, 452 miles of wall was built. However, only 80 miles of that was new, 47 miles of primary wall and 33 miles of secondary wall. The majority of the wall construction replaced existing structures built under previous presidents. In addition to physical barriers that ruin the landscape, cut through mountains, ruin the environment, and are hazardous to humans, we saw all this electronic surveillance. And remember, all of this border wall is on U.S. soil, so migrants can step on U.S. soil without ever breaching the wall. In effect, the wall doesn't really accomplish anything. Here is a picture of our caravan entering into one of the many border checkpoints that exist within what is called the 100-mile zone. The wall is a pretty recent thing. The U.S. constructed the first sections of the border wall in the 1990s under Bill Clinton. The wall initially limited to the cities of El Paso and San Diego. After the 9/11 terrorist attacks, there was a push to build more wall at our southern border, even though the terrorists entered through Canada on legal visas. Congress passed the Real ID Act in 2005, allowing the Department of Homeland Security to waive all laws to build a border wall. In 2006, the Secure Fence Act was passed, which mandated 700 miles of walls and barrier. Despite the environmental impacts and harm to human life, border wall construction received bipartisan support in the House and Senate. The Border Security, Economic Opportunity, and Immigration Modernization Act was passed in 2013 with support from all Democrats in the Senate. The bill provided $40 billion for, quote, all-out militarization of the U.S.-Mexico border and $20 billion for wall construction. But this bill did not pass in the House. The 2018 budget provided $1.6 billion for border wall construction, and the 2019 budget provided $1.3 billion. And under President Biden, there are still border wall projects. He has authorized a project to close gaps in the wall in Arizona, and he has given the go-ahead to increase the wall at Friendship Park to 30 feet. And let's also not forget that what we know as the modern U.S.-Mexico border today was not established until 1848. When Mexico refused the United States' initial offer to purchase the territory that is today the southwestern United States, the U.S. invaded Mexico in what we call the Mexican-American War in 1846. Conceding defeat, the two countries signed the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1948. In doing so, Mexico ceded over half of its pre-Texas territory to the U.S., and the U.S. increased its holding by 1/3. The picture on the left shows what the map of Mexico and the U.S. looked like in 1842, and the picture on the right depicts what the map looks like today. Many native tribes had their lands dissected by this new border and are now literally cut off from each other where walls have been built. And this slide doesn't even show all the tribes that existed in 1842, just the tribes that today have recognized reservation land. The actual picture is much more complicated. It would be difficult to draw a picture that shows the true magnitude. This is a very simplified picture. For example, Missing from this picture is the Carrizo Comecrudo tribe that participated in our sunrise service at Boca Chica Beach on the first day of our journey. It's no wonder that the saying, "We didn't cross the border crossed us," is a repeated refrain of people living in the borderlands. For me, one of the most moving parts of the journey was the day we visited Quito Baquito Springs. We met Elder Lorraine Eiler. She took us to Quito Baquito, where we saw the devastation to this historic oasis caused by the wall construction. The Trump administration ignored dozens of environmental and cultural protection laws to build the section of wall that you see behind Lorraine. Her grandparents used to live in the village at this spring. The village no longer exists. For me, to see this elder and hear the sadness in her voice, to see her expression when she looked at the wall, I will never forget. The rituals of her tribe were interrupted by this wall. Young men used to run from the Mexico side and from the US side to meet at the oasis. They can't do that anymore. Drug addiction and overdose deaths are a serious issue in the United States. 100,000 Americans die annually from drug overdose. But blaming this on migrants is naive, misguided, and mostly a political stunt. Blocking immigrants will not save American lives. Out of 106 fentanyl seizures reported by Border Patrol in the last year, where they provided information on citizenship, it was U.S. citizens 75% of the time carrying the drugs. And drugs primarily come through our ports of entry. They don't come through the desert. They don't come across the rivers. And drug cartels are not going to entrust their expensive drugs to a desperate migrant. We spent a morning with Professor Josiah Heyman at University of Texas, El Paso. He is a professor of anthropology, endowed professor of border trade issues, and director of UTEP's Center for Inter-American and Border Studies. We learned from Professor Heyman that the largest exports from the U.S. to Mexico are guns and money. And we get drugs in exchange.
We've been asked why go to Uvalde? It's not on the border. We went to witness in Uvalde because it tells the story of what happens in communities throughout the southern border region, Uvalde being in one of the most militarized border areas, especially now with Operation Lone Star. Uvalde has been shaped throughout its history by relations between Mexico and the US and by immigration and border policies. While we were there, we visited Robb Elementary, the site of a mass shooting on May 24th, 2022, that killed 19 children and 2 teachers. We were all deeply impacted by our experience there. How did this happen again? How have we failed the children again? 376 officers were on the scene in Uvalde, including 149 from U.S. Border Patrol and 14 from Homeland Security. DHS and Border Patrol efficiently use schools and their surroundings, regularly putting schools on lockdown while they hunt migrants. But they inefficiently stood outside Robb Elementary with other law enforcement for 77 minutes while children bled out as a lone teenage shooter massacred 21 people. DHS and Border Patrol played a decisive role in the failure to act and to equally value and save those lives. The same systems and border militarization that don't work for migrating people also failed the children of Uvalde. We met with some of the families. They shared their pain. They told us that they have been thrust into a world of advocacy that was previously unfamiliar to them. They believe in Second Amendment rights, but they want assault rifles banned. They do not want this happening in another school, in another town again. We met Jasmine Cazores, a teen who lost her sister, Jackie, and her cousin, Annabelle Rodriguez. Jasmine has become an advocate for change, and her message is talk to each other, love each other. She has spread that message as far as the US Congress. The grandmother of Xavier, a boy the same age as one of my grandsons, despite her grief and concern for her family, made the point she wanted people to understand that she isn't opposed to gun ownership, but strongly believes assault rifles should be banned. The families of Uvalde, committed to making a difference, ask us to carry their message forward. Do not forget us. Please don't let us stand alone in our fight. And we cannot forget the similarity to the massacre in El Paso on August 3rd, 2019, where a radicalized shooter killed 23 people who he targeted as Mexicans to stop what he claimed as a Hispanic invasion of Texas. He drove 650 miles to El Paso to carry out his intent. The same failed policies and hateful rhetoric that enabled this to happen in El Paso and Uvalde created the environment of xenophobia, inequity, and harsh treatment of those attempting to migrate at the southern US border. Knowing that at each of our stops there is a death toll, disappeared people, and people living tenuously in the shadows on the Mexican side of the border, we did not take this journey lightly. It was with deep respect for the right to migrate, outrage at the senseless loss of life, and a desire to shine a light on immigration injustice that guided our path. Migration is risky and can often be deadly. The migration routes from South America through the Darien Gap, Central America, and Mexico are extremely dangerous. Those fleeing violence, poverty, and political persecution risk perishing from dehydration, drowning, exposure, illness, murder, car accidents, and more. At least 853 asylum seekers died trying to cross the US-Mexico border in fiscal year 2022, making it the deadliest year recorded by the US government. Death tolls are certainly an undercount due to data collection limits. The organization Humane Borders places a red dot on the map seen on the slide for each location where remains have been recovered. For more than a decade, Alvaro Enciso has been using GPS data from the red dot maps to locate sites where he and volunteers place handmade wooden crosses. Each cross, he says, is where someone's dream has died. I saw several of these crosses when I joined the Green Valley Samaritans on a desert search and water drop. It was a surreal experience driving the sandy roads of the desert that are so vastly beautiful, yet so terribly dangerous for those desperate travelers on foot with no resources. Humane Border estimates over 3,600 undocumented migrants have died within Pima County Medical Examiner's jurisdiction alone since January 1990. Many remain unidentified, and no one knows how many lie undiscovered.
Remembering. On our journey, we stopped to remember 5 people who died at the border in recent years. Brownsville, Texas. Oscar Alberto Martin Ramirez, 25 years old, and his daughter, Angie Valeria, 23 months old, drowned June 24, 2019, when they tried to cross the Rio Grande River at Matamoros, Mexico. I especially remember this death, and it really hits home. Witness was at Homestead Air Base in Florida that year at that time. And news media was all around us. When they got word of what had happened, so did Witness. And I will never forget seeing that picture on that day. Oscar Alberto Ramirez, 25, he died trying to bring his 23-month-old Angie Belaria to safety and a new life in the United States. Ramirez's wife, Tanya, watched from the shore as her husband and daughter were pulled away by the strong river current near the border crossing between Matamoros, Mexico and Brownsville, Texas. The family was fleeing poverty in El Salvador and had secured a humanitarian visa in Mexico. But after spending 2 months in a migrant camp awaiting to apply for asylum in the United States, Martinez made that fateful decision and decided that they should try to cross the border. It is also at this time that not only did I learn, along with Witness at the border at Homestead Air Force Base, of this tragic death, but that was the first time I had ever heard the term floaters. And at first, it gives me utter disgust to hear it. But upon reflection, it should speak loudly as to what we put Border Patrol through and the National Guard and desensitizing themselves and addressing these deaths as that die on the river as floaters. Hidalgo, Texas, Diosmani Ramos Laurencio, killed by Border Patrol on January 29, 2021. The 23-year-old Cuban was shot 6 times in the chest after crossing the Rio Grande River from Reynosa, Mexico. Antelope Wells, New Mexico. Jacqueline Amé Rosemary Cal Makin became ill while in CBP custody and died on December 8, 2018. The 7-year-old Guatemalan and her father, Neri Cal, presented themselves at the crossing on December 2018. Although her death was ruled of natural causes, there are conflicting accounts and questions remain to this day. We stopped in Antelope Wells and left this memorial at the crossing. Nogales, Mexico. Jose Antonio Elena Rodriguez, 16 years old, killed on October 9th, 2022, 4 blocks from his home in Nogales, Sonora, Mexico, by USBP, US Border Patrol agent in Arizona. The picture of him at his memorial site also, and we also have pictured his mother, Ana Maria Vasquez, Border Patrol Victims Network. In honoring these 5, we also honor the many others who have lost their lives based on our country's cruel and inhumane system. Let us always remember.
Immigration is a complicated and messy issue. We took this journey to see with our own eyes the current conditions at the border, the effects of those immigration policies. Families are separated when sent to detention, and when released, not told where their spouse and children are. Belongings, shoelaces, glasses, medicines are not returned to them. People are treated as less than human, denied basic needs of food, water, shelter, medical care, or just a kind word. Unaccompanied minors are sent to Fort Bliss, the largest Army base in the United States. Any youth traveling with a grandparent, aunt, uncle, or older sibling is considered unaccompanied and separated. Our policies of denying people entry has enabled organized crime cartels to make money off of refugees fleeing for their lives. Treated as criminals, though asking for asylum is a right and not a crime. Article 14 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights states, everyone has the right to seek and to enjoy in other countries asylum from persecution. It is not dependent on your economic status, place of origin, or the color of your skin, or even how and when you enter the country. But we did see hope in the refugees whose faith and hope in a safer future is unshakable. Hope in Fernando, who every morning with just a couple of volunteers delivers water and food to hundreds waiting for Border Patrol in Yuma. Hope and Dora, who built a shelter in Sasabe, Mexico, for those deported and dropped in an area where no services or transportation is available and over 60 miles from the nearest town. Hope and the volunteer nurses who treat the badly blistered and thorn-filled feet of migrants and the severe diaper rash on babies. Hope in the people preparing daily hot meals for those denied entry. Hope is present in all the volunteers who have left their jobs to work for justice on a daily basis. Many who are harassed and threatened by militia groups, by Border Patrol, or our government for providing aid to those in need. We must find a way to stop the cruelty and welcome with dignity. What if we spent just a fraction of what it costs to militarize the border with people, sensors, and walls to provide a warm shelter, a drink of water, a meal, a welcoming attitude when refugees come requesting asylum, instead of taking away their shoelaces and their belongings and placing them in detention cells where the temperature is kept in the 50s? What if, instead of deporting people before we give them a chance to apply for asylum, we were to welcome them? Because in their desperation to find safety, they will try to cross again in more deadly areas. In a discussion around a campfire in the Arizona desert, one of our fellow travelers said, "I know I'm singing to the choir, but we need to grow the choir and we need to all sing louder." We will continue to sing until the choir sings loud enough to help us stop this inhumane treatment that is happening to our brothers and sisters who are fleeing their beloved homelands because of violence, climate change, and extreme poverty. They are doing nothing that we would not do to protect our children and our grandchildren if we were in their shoes. Here are a few ways that you can sing louder. Witnessing. See what is happening and share with others what you see. You can support the organizations providing humanitarian aid. We have compiled a list of organizations who provide direct support to migrants. They need monetary donations. Many of them welcome volunteers to provide hands-on support. You can contact your elected officials. The link here provides information on how to do that. You can write an op-ed, link to a resource that provides information on how to write an effective op-ed. You can carry this message. You can correct people when they are wrong. You can educate people. Invite any of us to speak to others. The border is everywhere. Everywhere that we do not recognize and honor each other's humanity. What will you do? How are you going to sing louder?
So Kat Griffith has a question. How many people are at the border right now, especially in Matamoros? Is there a tent camp or is it less organized than that? Sue Ann, do you want to take that because you've been in touch with, you've stayed in touch with people in Matamoros?
So I can tell you that in December, after we left, there was a really bad cold spell around Christmas time, and the temperatures dropped down to about, I think it was 29 degrees. At that point, prior to that, they were not allowed to be in a tent. They weren't even allowed to put a cover over their head. But when the cold spell came, they were allowed to put up tents. And then shortly after that, though, they emptied out the shelters that were in Matamoros. As of right now, with the new CBP One app, more people are getting appointments at the border. So there are more people coming through. Although seemed like a good sign of movement. The most recent update we've had is that people are now being turned away again at the border. I'm not sure the why, but it seems to be that the amount of people in the tents are less, and that at this point there is some movement with Doctors Without Borders going in, things that we did not see when we were there. Which kind of goes to the point of what the purpose of witnessing is, right? To go see what's actually happening, make some noise about it, and it brings attention, and then some resolutions come.
Thank you, Sue Ann. Julie, Hovey Brock is asking if we've got the partner list, and I think you were going to plan to share that, drop that into.
Yes, I will do that. Thank you.
So, yeah, we'll drop that in the chat, and I did figure out what was wrong with the chat. My apologies. So if you've got things you want to drop in there now, you can. Patty Brown asked if there's a version without the recorded narration with just a script. Yes, there is. And we can share that with you. Denise says, thank you for witnessing. Welcome. Elena says, thank you. Linda asked, do you have a document with some talking points that we can quote to legislatures? We have our scripts from this presentation, but Sue Ann, you've done some legislative work. Do you want to take this question?
Yeah, so actually it would be great to know if people might be interested in like a 15-minute or a half an hour presentation on how to go speak to your legislators. I have now spoken to 2 Congress people and 2 senators. So there's like a specific format and asks that my thought is like if people need to know how to contact their legislators to set up a meeting and then how to present the preparation for the meeting, there's like a specific format for that. And if enough people are interested, I'd be happy to teach on that. Or if you want to just message me directly, I'm happy to share what I've presented to some of the legislators already.
So maybe Sue Ann, if you are able in the chat, just drop in your email address if people want to reach out to you. Okay, we have a question from Jim McKeever. He says, how do we combat Biden and other Dems who treat everything related to immigration through a political lens? Biden is going ahead with the new 30-foot walls at Friendship Park in San Ysidro/Tijuana. Democrats are not our friend, and CBP 1 does not work. Who wants to take that one?
I will.
Okay, thank you, Vielka.
Hi, I'm sorry, who was it that asked that question?
Yeah, Jim McKeever.
Hi, Jim. I'm Vielka, and I am currently chair of a Democratic executive committee here in Iowa. And I've been involved with the Democrats for a little while, both in Florida and now here in Iowa. And I understand your feeling. I really do. I can be transparent and say that I too I'm upset at the Biden administration for seeming not to keep the promises that were made during campaign, and the frustration with the Title 42 and seeming as that he's being pushed around. However, what can you do? You can do what you're doing today. You're attending one of these webinars. You can do like Sue Ann was saying, is hold them accountable. As Democrats, we must hold our own Democrats accountable and strongly so that we can pressure them and make sure that they go ahead and work on legislation and be aware of what's going on at the border and work to counter the other side's and the indifference in the other side's narrative. So I encourage you to please get with Sue Ann and learn and do some letter writing or to do some op-eds. Anything of that nature will help. And again, share the message and visit the border if you're able or possible, and stay in touch with us.
Can I just add one more thing? One of the consistent messages I got from the legislators I spoke to, and I'm from Pennsylvania, was that nobody has talked to them about what they've seen at the border. Nobody who's been impacted at the border, and nobody who's seen it with their own 2 eyes. So hearing what I saw brought it home for them in a way, like it brought them there to see it, so that they can carry it in with them when they're going to make decisions on policies.
Thank you, Sue Ann and Vielka. There's a question here from Linda. Did you say you have a list of agencies that are helping migrants that need some support? Yes, we do have that. And I don't know, Julie, if you've dropped it.
I'm working on it.
Okay, Julie's working on dropping that in the chat. And if for some reason we don't get that done before the end of this, we will email that to everybody.
I've got one in there. I've got one more to go.
Okay. Madeline asked, why isn't the US government being challenged by the World Court, for example, to honor their commitment when they signed Article 14? That's a good question.
Good question.
We ask it all the time.
I think it probably has to start with holding our legislators accountable and asking them that question directly. I would think they're in positions to do exactly that. But we can get back to you, Madeline. Thank you for being here.
Heidi Ostertag says, hello, everyone. We were just filming at Matamoros. Oh, shoot, her question went away. Anyway, I don't know where it went. Hold on. She had an update on Matamoros, and for some reason it just
Look under the answered. I answered it, and maybe that's why.
oh, okay. Anyway, I don't know how.
She
answer.
went
Sorry.
ahead talking about that they were filming in Matamoros and that they noticed the population had dropped down some, but also noticed about 200, maybe more, that they could put a number to. That's what she was addressing.
Okay, great. Thank you. Sorry, there's too many questions flying by for me to keep up with all of them. Kat Griffith has a question. My question refers to the program offering 2-year visas to people from Venezuela, Nicaragua, Cuba, and Haiti. I assume, Kat, you're referring to the special parole program. And again, Sue Ann, we know of a family from Venezuela that was allowed and to cross, so you may have some information.
So the family that I referred to in the presentation, Angelise and her family, while they were in Matamoros, the CBP1 app came out. They were able to make appointments they had filed for Title 42 exceptions. I'm not sure about the parole part, but with the Title 42 exceptions, they were given appointments to present at the border. But all of these things are constantly changing. And even like with the CBP1 app, families and groups with friends are supposed to present together. That's not happening. The mother got sent to Reynosa, which is an hour and a half away. She had to pay to take a car because the cartel goes after the people on the buses. Her husband had an appointment 3 days later, right there in Matamoros. Her daughter-in-law had an appointment, but the kids weren't on the appointment. So the mother and the father were able to get into the US. The daughter-in-law and 2 small children were stuck in Matamoros for weeks. And it was really about consistently trying to get back on the app, which is very hard to get on because the Wi-Fi is so bad in Matamoros. And there are thousands of people up and down the border trying to get through on that app at the same time every morning, because at 8 o'clock in the morning, there's a 15-minute window. Fortunately, that family is all together now in Louisville, but that's kind of a rarity.
And it was way too.
I'm sorry.
Bielka, there's a question about, have you been able to meet with senators and representatives from Iowa? Since that's where you live, I'll let you take that one.
Yes, I do live in Iowa. And right now you have to remember that in Iowa, we have the GOP is pretty much in charge. So yes, I have written letters to Senator Grassley. Yes, I have written letters to the representatives. Our Democratic representative in the district that I currently live in lost her election. And so who's in place now is a guy named Zach Nunn, who shares his views just like DeSantis down in Florida, the governor down in Florida. Likewise, the governor here in Iowa is Kim Reynolds, and she also is not sympathetic to this, to the plight of asylum seekers. So my concern is that what goes on in Texas and in Florida can and will happen here in Iowa. So I'm on it. I will be talking to legislators wherever I am. And I will try to hold them accountable and try not to accept their canned responses if I write letters to them, like I got from Senator Grassley. So thank you. Yes, I'm on the case.
Fran, I assume this might be Fran Schindler, is asking, is anyone going to DC to speak with representatives in their offices? I don't know if anybody here on the panel has plans to travel to DC. If you're, you might indicate in the chat if you have plans to go to DC. I know there's been some discussion about a coordinated action in DC, but I haven't heard anything in the last few days in terms of when or exactly what that coordinated action might look like.
I can tell you that the senators that I talked to would have met me in DC. I chose not to do that because one specifically, John Fetterman, actually, because of his auditory processing, it was better to have a Zoom conversation with him. And it also enabled me to bring other people onto the call. They like numbers. They want to see that more than one of their constituents is upset about something. So if you are going to DC, let me know. I'm happy to come down and meet you.
Jim McKeever is making a point that CBP1 has trouble recognizing dark skin in photos, basically rejecting Haitians and others. And yeah, we've heard that, and that is absolutely not acceptable. And
I've been coordinating with a friend in Juarez, Mexico, across from El Paso, who has a shelter for women. And of the people there, 3 have managed to get through and get appointments so far. Just a lot of holdups. And just they think they've gotten registered and then they can't get an appointment. And it's been really confusing, and the pictures are really hard to capture.
And as a follow-up to Fran's previous question, she's asking if senators are allowing people in their offices. I don't know the answer to that.
They both set up, both of my senators set up appointments for me to be able to be in person. I switched it to Zoom. So
Okay.
I think it would be dependent on your senator.
Kat Griffith again. I heard a couple of weeks ago that a number of migrants coming from the 4 countries Biden is allowing to apply from has dropped 97%. Do you think that will continue once people realize that 30,000 slots per month are taken up really quickly? You know, Kat, the reality is that the policies are policies of deterrence. And that is the administration is getting the result they're looking for. And, you know, but I don't think it'll stop everybody. It will stop some people, but it doesn't stop people from it. You know, doesn't mean that their situations are any better. It just means that they've decided at this time not to take the risk, but they'll probably, if their situations don't change, I would guess, try to make the trip again at another time.
I think
Go ahead.
that there's a lot of people, because they're being deported right away, that they're waiting until 42 gets dropped, or hopefully gets dropped. So that has decreased the numbers that are crossing right now. And I think that number will increase as we get closer to the May deadline, when we say that COVID is over. And the other part of that would be that people are going to cross in more deadly areas. You know, they're not coming here just for the fun of it.
Right.
They're for safety, and they will continue to cross. And if they cannot cross legally and turn themselves in and find safety, they will cross in places that they probably won't survive it, in hopes, because their alternative is death.
Thank you, Rosie. Bob Lee is asking if the presentation will be posted somewhere so you can share it through social media. Yes, we will upload this to YouTube with the Q&A. We have also shared it on Facebook Live, so it'll be available on Facebook. Judith Calhorn. Oh, wait, Sue-Ann, it looks like maybe you answered that, or you are typing an answer. Okay. Patty Brown, May 11th, supposedly Title 42 will be lifted. Should we contact our congressional delegation daily to work on clear immigration policy between now and then, and maybe show up on May 11th? May 11th sounds like a good day to show up in DC.
Spring.
Yeah, I'm sure that people are thinking about that, since the Supreme Court just announced that they're not going to take the case on Title 42. So
And
and
Margaret's
saying, yeah, go ahead, Julie.
Okay.
ahead.
Margaret is saying in the chat that Welcome with Dignity is planning a protest in Washington, D.C. So you may want to follow Welcome with Dignity. We post a lot on the Witness Facebook about Welcome with Dignity. So.
Okay, hold on. I gotta go back up. Barbara Peter, the country needs more workers, yet the Minnesota legislature wants to pass a bill lowering the age of children working in meat packing plants. This must stop. Great, thanks to all the witnesses. Brilliant. Thank you for that comment. Yeah, it's so much of this doesn't make much sense. It's sort of Fran asking how we can share the presentation. Fran, just get in touch with us. We'll work to share with you in whatever format you want.
I put our witness email address in the chat.
Great, thank you, Julie. And Fran wants people to let her know if you're going to DC. I think Fran is ready to go to DC. This is from Gloria. What elected officials have pledged to help? I know there's a short list, and I know Cory Booker is one that has pledged some help. In fact, I have going to a meeting with him in about a week. But at the moment, my brain is not remembering everybody else on that list. So does anybody else want to pipe in and help answer that?
So there is a Hispanic.
Senator Menendez,
Yes.
Margaret is adding in the chat. Thank you, Margaret.
Yeah, I would look up the Hispanic caucus, because they've been speaking
The,
loudly.
the Congressional Hispanic Caucus.
Okay. Bonnie Uffman, who would one contact for information about the status of the program offering 2-year visas from Venezuela and 3 other countries? Are the applications being processed? So Bonnie, we can probably get you more information after this, but I can say that, that program has some severe limitations, and some of them being they have to apply outside of the country. They have to have a valid passport. They're supposed to fly in. They need a secured sponsor. So there's a lot of hurdles to being eligible for that program. But who you would contact to get the specifics of that, we can reach out to you afterwards. I don't have a contact off of it, unless somebody else here has a contact off the top of their head.
Okay, there was a question that came up in the chat about if children were still being separated at the border. And I just wanted to speak to that for a second. So there is, there's not really a rhyme or reason. There are families that are still being separated at the border. We ran into several men that had, one in Matamoros, who had been separated from his wife, and she had gotten into the country, and he was kept in Matamoros. And then there were 2 men in El Paso, one who had just a dead cell phone and no way of contacting his wife. There was another gentleman who was crying inconsolably because he had been separated from his wife and 4 children. So they are still separating people, and unless you can prove, and these are people who have been fleeing for months and months and months and have had a lot of their belongings stolen, unless you can prove that you're the biological parent of the child, they do separate the kids. And then there's a process. And I would myself like to have a better understanding, because we were outside of Fort Bliss and there was 131 children inside that day. And there, Bethany Services in my area does a lot of work where they are housing unaccompanied minors into different homes, but it's unclear to me who gets housed, what the process is, and why they were separated from their families, and why we keep moving people. Like, so they come into the border, they get put in some sort of detention center, and then they might go with a temporary family before they get reunited with their regular family. It seems like a lot of trauma on these kids.
Can I also say something about that?
Yes.
We have a friend, Sue-Ann's been working with recently with that family from Venezuela that she was able to graciously help come be with her family and their daughter. Sorry. So our friend down in the border tells us, he was letting us know that, and this speaks to the way the system changes on a moment's notice. So before, people like this Venezuelan family were able to go ahead and use the automated system and apply and be separated, that was one nature. Now we've come to find out, due to our friend telling us, is that they're changing the rules again. And now you can't apply as a family. It has to be each individual to include children. So the system itself, whichever angle you attack it or try to comply with it, is geared to family separation. That's what they do. And so as far as the numbers, I saw somebody ask about numbers. As far as the numbers of the separation, and administration saying they have reunited X amount of children, that is a low number. There are still children separated. When facilities close, the child detention centers close, there's the government has been known to not really have a way that they're tracking whatever happens to those kids. Do they actually go to their families or sponsors, or are they deported? We just don't know. So it is geared towards discouragement, towards penalizing. And one of the better ways and efficient ways that the government is practiced at doing this is through family separation. It is happening. Thank you.
Julie, you heard about a recent case where a family got separated.
Who, me?
Yes, you.
Sorry,
it was-
I had muted.
You had heard about a family where the parents, but their like 19-year-old son was deported.
Right. A family, it was a stepfather and a mother and a 5-year-old and a 19-year-old. And they did not recognize the stepfather as the young man's parent, and separated him when they let the rest of the family in. And it took them days to find out that he had been deported back to Bogota alone with no money and no passport, deported as an adult. But 19-year-olds are kids to me. So
I was going to say anybody.
Heartbreaking story.
19-year-old is still a child.
Oh, absolutely.
Fran is saying in the Q&A, anybody going to DC, Capitol Skyline is a good place to stay. We used this many times when I was involved in civil disobedience. So that to your.
Can we do some civil disobedience, Fran?
Okay, well, we had scheduled this till 6:15 Eastern time, but we've cleared all the questions in the Q&A. So unless there's any last minute questions, we'll go ahead and wrap up. I'll give everybody on the panel a chance to go around and say one last thing if they'd like to. Let me start with you, Rosie.
Thanks for listening to us. We would love to come talk to any groups you have. That's important to share this in any form. And just remember, when you contact your legislatures, talk about the personal angles, talk about the shoelaces, talk about the humanity part. Why are we doing this? Yes, we need overhaul comprehensive plan for the border and immigration, but we need to know why people are being treated the way they are. And we need to get that changed, and we need it changed now.
Sue Ann?
I'm kind of going to echo a little bit of what Rosie said. Thank everybody for making sure that you're paying attention to what's going on. Please help us uplift these people's stories. After we were there, it was all over the news what was happening in El Paso, but it's gone away again. And these people are still impacted, and many of them are worse off than they were when we were down there. So the more we can uplift their stories, the better. And let's start with shoelaces. A lot of this does not require big policy changes. We don't need to be taking people's eyeglasses. We can simply, if we could change the culture of the CBP and welcome people with dignity and respect, that's a place to start. Thank you.
Bianca?
Thank you, everybody. And I think it starts with you. What you heard today, how you heard today about today's presentation, and maybe some of the people that you know that are in this presentation, or how you heard about it through your friends. Have the conversation, and the same questions you asked us, ask yourselves and see how you can also get out of your own comfort zone, because it does take that trust and that courage to come out and stand up for what it's right. Again, if you do have a chance to go to the border, it's a long border. You will find many groups, many good people working there that could use the volunteerism. So please consider that. If you cannot, again, we have the lists that will be promoting some of the partnerships that we have, and I don't want to say promoting, but letting you know about those partnerships and people that need help, the shelters. And likewise is in your own homes and communities, is when you hear about people talking that these people should just stay in their countries, think about what those countries are and what they're going from, and maybe, just maybe, what effect our country had on those countries that made it so horrible for those peoples of many nations to want to come to this country. And let's not forget that after all, we're supposed to be a welcoming nation, and we're not. We are only for a few, and that has to be looked into. But again, it starts with you, and I thank you so very much from the bottom of my heart that you are here, and that maybe we reach one or two of you, and then it goes, the circle starts. So thank you.
Julie?
I echo everything said. I also, Barb just popped up in the chat, and it was something I wanted to also mention is, besides the people we need to welcome with dignity to allow into this country to pursue a life that is safe, there are people already here, documented and undocumented, that live in the shadows. A friend that I have made from Cameroon over the past few years had to wait a year to get a work visa. And if she hadn't had a cousin to live with, she would have either had to work under the table, which would be illegal, and if she got caught, she'd be deported, or what would she have done? And I know that sponsors agree to support, but there are a lot of people in the shadows, and those rules need to change. And thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you to everybody on the panel for all your amazing work to pull this presentation together. And thank you for being here today. And for all those who had questions about sharing the information, it's all, we'll share any of it that you want. We'll share the slides, we'll share the recordings. We tried to do this and you can then edit it and change it and making it personal. So we did this in hopes to help everybody share, especially those of you that were on the journey, share your stories about the trip. If we just go on the journey and we don't talk about it, we don't have as much impact. So, and I think one of the big things we all can do is when we hear somebody say something that is inaccurate, is wrong information, wrong facts, we need to correct them. We need to inform them, and we need to share what we know, even with those who don't want to hear it. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining us, and have a nice.
Patty wants to know if we can save the chat, and that can be done.
Yes. we
And the
see it.
Q&A.
Yes, the Q&A and
And
the
the
chat.
Q&A.
Yes, we'll
Yeah.
have files for those.
Yeah,
Great.
and I would like to say one more thing real quick. We have been working on some documents that kind of reinforce the information that's in our slides, and we're happy to share those. So we can, let that be known, or you can ask about it on the different topics of the presentation. And thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.